Hello, and welcome to a session of, I'm going to call it kind of behind enemy lines, kind of friendly lines, as we've got our guy back in the house, EJ Snyder, back in again here at the Hawks Nest from Bootleg Football here on YouTube. EJ, welcome back in the Hawks Nest. Thank you for coming on in here and helping me preview a bit of this matchup with the Bears coming up here.
Happy to do it. Happy to be back on the channel. Not so happy about the game. We'll talk about that mostly because the Bears have had a season off the rails. But this is, as you said, a more friendly enemy confines than I'm typically used to.
Well, on this one, as we were talking offline about this, folks, typically we might go a little bit more into the matchup details of what's going on between these two teams from a stylistic standpoint of things. But today, I think we're going to lean a little bit more into some of the high conceptual stuff here with both these two teams and what's going on with them, where they're going, the path they need to be going in the future from EJ's standpoint, especially here in kind of that outlook. Because I think that's where a lot of both of our fan bases are a bit. We are still in the Seahawks fans, of course. We can get the win, the Rams can lose, then we do control our fate a little bit to that final game. But we then need a lot to happen there on the forefront on Saturday for that to go down. So I guess just to start out here, let's get the big picture outlook from you on where you're at as far as, this Bears team. It's been a tough year for you, no doubt about that. Not where you were maybe hoping for. You had to fire your coach. But, where do you sit as far as the outlook of this team and where they are at in their progression to getting to a state of being able to start making some noise?
It's a great question. I'm wobbling a bit more than I was a month ago. A month ago, if you'd asked me that, I would have said that Ryan Poles, the general manager, probably survives. I would have said the roster is pretty darn talented, needs a talent infusion in certain areas, but that's doable within, I would say, one cycle of a draft and free agency. And that moving forward, as long as they got the right head coach, that the outlook was pretty good. We're a month into this. The elevation of Thomas Brown has been difficult because he was the passing game coordinator. He was elevated to the offensive coordinator. They had 2 good games. And then, as you said, they fired Eberflus and they elevated Brown. And that's a lot of responsibility bump inside of a month. You're aware of this. Passing game coordinator to head coach is a completely different level of responsibilities. And as soon as that happened, the wheels fell off. They went out to play the 49ers and nothing. It just, they fell completely on their face. And in successive weeks, we've seen issues with effort. We've certainly seen some issues with execution. There's almost a legendary first half scoring drought that they're on in the last, I think it was 5 games before they scored in the last game. The score that they'd racked up in first halves of the last 5 games was 73-0. So a tremendously frigid start for the offense, always putting themselves in a hole. And then the problem is, it's good and bad. It's 2 sides of a coin. Late in the season, you typically get young players opportunities, and those are important for the team to see at live game speed, especially going into next year. Hey, can we count on this guy? Can we release a vet and move this guy into a starting position? It's been more injury based in Chicago, but still those are opportunities for young players. And a lot of those young players that Ryan Poles drafted have not performed particularly well. And the offense has continued to kind of sputter. Caleb's looked like he's regressed, which is, he's obviously the most important player. We'll talk about him quite a bit today, but it's gotten muddier and murkier. And now a month later, I'm like, I'm not sure Ryan Poles survives. I can see a road where the Bears do that, but I can also see a road where the Bears say, we want a very clean cut here, and we want a new general manager to mesh with our new head coach, because we see folks in our division who made that match successfully, and that's what we want. And that seems a more realistic possibility. A month ago, I would have said, nah, they'll keep Ryan. He's done a good job, like, reshaping the roster. Now, after a month of that sort of playing out in not very favorable light, I'm not so sure about that.
And how long has Poles been there as a GM?
This is his 3rd year. So
okay,
he'll be going into his 4th talent acquisition cycle.
Yeah, it was tough to watch where, and I tried to warn you with Waldron, brother. I knew that
you did. You did. And many people who had receipts on Waldron reminded me of that. And again, it looked not great at the start, and I was hoping for it to warm up, and instead of warming up, it got worse. And that was really the beginning of the end, not only for Waldron, but also for Matt Eberflus.
Did you feel like the confounding thing to you with Waldron, on top of, we can go to the individual part, we won't really get into the individual parts of where he was kind of not able to make it get done, but the part that just really betwixt me was he comes from McVay's offense. Yeah. His offense looks nothing like McVay. And that's always the part I was sitting there trying to, and I wonder if that was the thing that continued there with Chicago.
It was more the thing that was really confusing to me about Waldron's offense, or lack thereof, was the usage of certain players. There was almost it's like face blindness to their skill set, right? He would look at certain players and have the most common one that we talk about is wide receiver usage. Chicago's got 3 wide receivers that are very prominent: Keenan, DJ Moore, and Rome, of course, Rome Odunze, who they just drafted at 9 overall. Now, those are 3 different receivers that all have really cool skill sets, and you can maximize those in an offense. And instead, he would almost like mix them up and put them in the roles where you felt like they really shouldn't be in those roles. Keenan is a great route runner, always has been. That's been his bread and butter his entire time in the league. He would run him on deep stuff. Like he's not a spring chicken. He's never been a speed guy. And, he wouldn't come open. And that's obviously frustrating for an offense and tough for a new quarterback to be looking at that option going, I'm not throwing it over there. He's not open. DJ is a great yak guy in space. He runs like a running back with the ball in his hands. And they would run him on deep 9s, which he has good speed, but okay. Or they would just run him on like tunnel screens where he's going to get a ton of contact. And you normally say, oh, that's all right. But he's really good in the mid-range, especially against zones. They just wouldn't do it. And then when they had to pull a wide receiver off the field, they would leave Keenan and pull Rome. And it's like, you just got this guy at 9 to be a contested catch threat, right? To be at least your wide receiver 2. And he would just put him in these spots and he'd basically run like behind the line of scrimmage yak stuff for him. And it was like, I don't get it. What are you doing? And he did a little bit with the same with the run game. Now the run game started to come around before he left, but in the beginning he was running Swift in basically inside concepts. And Swift has terrible vision. Like he's very fast. He's amazing in space. And it took Waldron like a month after all the offseason stuff, after seeing Swift in practice every day, watching tape of him presumably at his former stops, to go, oh, yeah, he's tough as hell, but like he doesn't know where to go when it's a small opening on the inside. I need to get this guy on the outside. I need to get him in space. And there's plenty of concepts, especially in McVay's offense, for that. And he just didn't do it for a month. And so Swift correspondingly looked terrible. Run game looked terrible. Again, young quarterback, you want to lean on the running game. Couldn't do it. And then this misuse of wide receivers. And it was just kind of this very confusing jumble of like, you have a lot of good pieces, but you're not. It's like playing chess against somebody that doesn't really know how the pieces move.
Yeah.
And you're like, what are you doing? Like, that's not going to work. Maybe you know more than I do about chess, right? And then, nope, goes out on the field and falls flat. And you're like, no, I was right. You were confused about that. And it just never got better. I was really hoping it would warm up and he would hit his stride. Started to do that, as I said, in the run game. Never really did it in the passing game. Just couldn't get it going.
Well, and as I was watching, I remember the Cardinal Bear game. Was just looking for the Cardinal game, and something that stood out to me there when you watched that was just how silly kind of the coaching staff was operating from to versus how you see the Cardinals who, buy into who they are. They know who they are. They understand their identity. They stated that identity. They aren't the most talented team. And then you have the Bears on the other side with this rookie quarterback. And I mean, in the Cardinals right now, I think, in my opinion, they're doing a lot of kind of limiting down Kyler's volume of attempts in games and getting him into that magic spot of right around 30 per game, knowing that when you get him outside of that into sort of that 40 range, you're into trouble town. And that's where the interceptions are going to start to poke up and bad decisions start to rear up. And on Caleb, here you had 2 different teams where Cardinals are sticking to the run, hammering your Bears with it, staying on it. And then on the other side, Bears couldn't throw the ball enough with this rookie quarterback who's obviously a little in over his head. And it just didn't make sense to me why they would take that approach here this year in general in terms on, try to protect your rookie quarterback a little bit in some of the play calling.
Yeah, and that was really frustrating and compounded by offensive line health issues and just poor play overall. I think one of the people that's sort of skated the most and is still on the coaching staff is Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach, because at this point, yeah, you can say Ryan Poles made poor choices both in free agency and the draft in terms of like Darnell Wright's turned out pretty well, but other than that, there are not a lot of bright spots on the offensive line. Braxton Jones has been serviceable. Coleman Shelton's come on a little bit later on in the season, but he struggled mightily early on, and guard play has been atrocious. Injuries have been horrible. Kieran Amagaji, who was the 3rd round rookie this year, got his first start again because of injuries at left tackle and looked whew, he was in the deep water. It was tough to watch. He got beat like a drum. And that, again, the longer this goes on, the more those guys get opportunities to play and have those moments on the field. And that's a combination of the personnel you bring in and the coaching they're getting. Like, it's talking about protecting a rookie quarterback. Like, Caleb's taken more hits at quarterback than even this might push your memory a little bit, but the Mike Martz team, where Mike Martz just
7-step drops,
completely refused to do anything and say, "No, I'm just going to stand him back there and get him killed." And at that point, they had, I think, 48 sacks. This was a couple of weeks ago. My buddy Lester Wiltfong, who does Windy City Gridiron and has been doing a column called Sack Watch for the last, I think it's 10 or 11 years, assigning, blame for all sacks for the Chicago Bears. Had them at, I think the Martz team at that point a couple of weeks ago was at 48, and the Caleb team this year is at 52 already. And it's just a lot of punishment to put on a rookie signal caller. I don't care who they are. So
I think it's just the worst thing. The Bears tried to get out ahead of this, where you got to give them credit where they didn't do what they did with Fields, where you just gave them an empty reservoir of an offensive line talent wise. It doesn't sound like it's worked out. I guess I would also, to that, you'd put in the mix Tevin Jenkins on that as well.
Yeah, injuries have been a problem with Tevin when he's healthy and on the field. He's played pretty well, but again, any line, and you talked about this a little bit with the Cardinals, like not necessarily the most talented team. Now on the offensive line, I think they're pretty talented. They've had their injury issues. I really like their center, Froholt. I think he's a great player. But they play together and they understand the assignment. And any offensive line, I don't care talented or not talented, has to play together. And if they don't, they're not going to look good no matter what. You can have a very talented front five and have them have communication issues, and they're going to get run. Like, that's just a thing. So it's been a combination of all of those things, and it's been pure chaos. Like, if you like offensive line play, please, please, please don't watch the Bears. It will be bad for your mental health. You will be screaming at your monitor in like minutes, and it's just not good.
I don't know. Our Seattle team might be right there with you. Step on this one, brother.
Yeah.
we might have you
living in the Pacific Northwest. I definitely have had cast an eye on the Seattle line play and gone,
my God,
that actually kind of looks familiar. And that makes me terribly sad for both myself and the Hawks offensive line. It's gotten a little bit better. Olu was a stabilizing influence when he came in, which was great. He got banged up. Abe Lucas coming back has been pretty nice. There's been some stabilization. The run game certainly picked up, a couple of weeks ago for a couple of weeks, which is really nice. But yeah, you all have seen, you've been through the wars. You understand.
Like you say, you got Lomé in there. He's helping you on the run game, but my man's turning in single digits with the PFF pass pro grades. Not that I lean on the grades of that, but just it's in addition to 11 pressures given up, 2 sacks and just a lot of it. He's really struggling in pass pro right now. And he's the third guy they've gone to. And so I think that this is also an interesting place where our two organizations overlap, because the question, you point to the offensive line, you guys have put some investment into the talent there on that line. So we get to the question of, and I think it's one of the tougher ones now as I look at the NFL, absent you just throwing all the resources out of it, how do you build a strong offensive line? Is it a matter of just, I've come to the point where I feel like you just have to overpay. That you have to end up in a position at this point of almost going over the top, because I've just seen, organizations that are a little bit more of a patient, like we have, one early, couple late, sort of go cheap in free agency with the last legs kind of veteran who's maybe got one more year you can sort of squeeze out.
Yep.
What do you think at this point is the pathway on? I think both our organizations will be kind of similar in what they need to do to get there, but I don't know what it is that is the path.
Well, it starts with a great offensive line coach. If you have a great offensive line coach, it is one of the biggest force multipliers in the NFL, period. Like, with no question. You look at what the Eagles do with Jeff Stoutland. Now, they've put a lot of talent in there as well, but he also has that line playing very, very well. And he's done some tremendous development with guys like Jordan Mailata, who was not a great football player, was a great athlete, and is now a great football player. Yes, he has a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer in Lane Johnson, and he had Jason Kelsey. But you look at guys like Cam Jurgens. Like, Cam Jurgens was not the most highly sought after center. He definitely had some warts. He was tremendous athletically, but he was also a little bit all over the place. A couple of years now with Jeff Stoutland, Philly fans, for the most part, have not missed Jason Kelsey at center, and that's almost impossible. So having an offensive line coach, we see, the offensive line coach that moved from Tampa to Carolina with Dave Canales, and he made that Tampa Bay line very, very good. The Carolina line was much maligned. They didn't put a lot of new resources into it. They have a lot of the same players they had last year when everybody was complaining about it. This year, they have played much, much better football with basically the same talent. So having that's kind of the master key, is having an offensive line coach that can develop and coach offensive linemen, again, from all over the spectrum and make them work together, allows general managers not to have to go out and spend a top 10 pick on a tackle to make them work. We were just talking this week on the podcast that came out this morning about Luke Gadecki, the Bucs tackle, the right tackle, who is top 10 in the league. I mean, his left tackle, Tristan Wirfs, is number 1 in the league, but he's top 10 in the league. And you have 2 top 10 tackles on the same line. That Gadecki was a second round pick. Like, I wasn't sure whether he was going to play guard or tackle. Having a good offensive line developer as the coach who understands not only game plan, but also how to get linemen to play at their top potential and play together is the way you get out of that. Because I think you're right. It's very expensive, and you can't just pay your way out of it in free agency. It certainly helps. Bears are probably going to have to do some of both. A little
Panthers did a little of that last year too, didn't they? With the
little from column A, little from column B, but you got to have both. And it starts with a coach. And then you're going to get some of these guys that, like you said, with the Hawks, a couple of later round draft picks, who are going to contribute, who are going to come in. They're going to have to play. Injuries happen in the NFL. It's a long season. Offensive linemen, there's a lot of wear and tear. You're going to have some of those 4th round guys, 5th round guys who can come in and hold their own. They don't have to be stars, but they can't be, gate 68. We can't just be letting people free for sacks. Like that's going to get your quarterback killed. So having a guy that can maximize that on the coaching staff is huge for an NFL organization.
Seems like we only got about 5 of those walking the earth, though.
There's not a ton. It's kind of like alien quarterbacks, right? If you don't have one, what are you going to do? Well, you got to do all the other things. I think there's some really good offensive line coaches out there. My secret hope, everybody's talking about Ben Johnson to the Bears. You talk about future in the opening and where the Bears need to go. Everybody's talking about the coach. We'll get there. But my secret hope is that if it's Ben Johnson, that he brings Hank Fraley with him. Because Hank Fraley is the current offensive line coach for Detroit. He's done a tremendous job there. Obviously, a ton of investment on the line. They put a lot of high picks there, but they also play very, very well together. So, like, Ben, if you come to Chicago, bring Hank Fraley. Like, I think Hank Fraley might be the bigger addition. Certainly the less heralded one that might make a bigger difference.
Yeah, and that's where I would love to get, to me, the offensive line guy. I mean, I think about the old generation, Scarmecchia, Mudd. How many more offensive line coach names can I think of from the past generations, in that way? And
Callahan,
Callahan too, and he's still rolling there with his son going. So there are good ones. It just seems hard to find those guys, is what I'm trying to say on that. And so then I go, well, if I can't get that and I'm stuck with my O-line coach as it is, does it then become about maybe topping off the tank,
Sure.
spilling it over the sides, and that you got to just be willing to do that, because we have tried here for quite a long time. It's been 10 years since Snyder's really built a quality offensive line. I'm not talking dominant, by the way. I'm just talking, just gets to middle of the road at this point would be a boon, where we're so back in every single year. And so that's where I've gotten to myself. Maybe it's desperation on it. Maybe it's not the smartest approach to it, EJ, but I mean, even that Panther team, man, that new line coach helped, but $20 million, the first $20 million a year guard at right guard, $13 million to Damian Lewis at left guard. It's going to give you about average play, but with Ike Okawanu that they drafted a couple years ago at left tackle, and it's like, it kind of comes together. Good offensive line coach. So I think you're signing off on my approach. If we can't get the grade A offensive line coach, go hard on this. Priority number 1 this offseason from a Seahawks standpoint. And would you look at the same thing from your Bears situation?
Yeah, it is the number 1 thing at this point. It doesn't necessarily line up ideally with where the talent is in the draft, because that's the other thing. There's only 2 pools here, right? You can only get them from free agency, occasionally trades, but top offensive linemen don't come available in trade without a reason typically, and the draft. And so you have to look at, like, hey, every team has needs. Do those needs line up with the draft this year? And there's some good offensive tackles for sure. I don't know that it's as deep as it has been. There's some very top talent folks. It drops off more quickly, which means, again, supply is limited. Demand's going to be great as always, which means you're going to have a very high pick and be willing to spend it if you need a premium tackle. Into your offensive line, I think there are more guys this year, but the center class has taken a huge hit. A couple of guys going back, guy getting injured, like 3 of the top, arguably 4 centers available are not now going to be available in the draft, which means, again, supply gets super limited. There's a great need, but the Bears are going to have to bite the bullet and probably overinvest because it just hasn't worked. And if it just doesn't work again, you're done. Like, you might ruin Caleb from a physical standpoint, and you can't afford to do that. He's the most important guy in the building. Therefore, you're going to have to do everything. And I would, yes, people ask me all the time, would you pay Trey Smith? Would you make him the highest paid guard in the league? I would. I've met Trey. I'm biased. Like, I've seen his tape. I loved him coming out. I was worried about the medical issues just like everybody else. That's why the Chiefs got him where they got him. But I got a chance to meet him this summer at OLM down in Dallas, offensive line mastermind, Duke Manyweather's offensive line summit. And he's one of Duke's guys. And I got to talk to him for about 15 or 20 minutes after one of the little huddles. And I just, when I say talk, I got to listen to him. Like, I shut my mouth and was like, you know way more about this, and I want to know everything you know. So I'm going to ask you like one question and shut up, be quiet. And in that 15 or 20 minutes, it was one of the most valuable professional experiences I've had this year. And the question is, would I pay that guy all the money for the on the field stuff, for between the ears stuff, for the off the field stuff? I would pay that guy the money, and I would not sweat it, because he is a rock that you can build your church on. Like, that is a guy that is that kind of player. So I would worry less about that. A lot of times when you're paying anybody, any position at the top of the market, I'm like, you probably do better. Trey, I'm not sure you can do better. So I'm just like, nope, that would be great, but don't stop there. Like, don't go, oh, we paid Trey all the money and it's fixed, because it's not, because you're so far in the hole. You need another center. Like, Shelton's been good, but I would love it if Shelton was the backup for a good reason. There was a scare. Looks like Braxton Jones avoided serious injury, but it looked like he might have torn his knee completely. And again, late in the season, that means long recovery. It means he's not going to be available for most of next season. That means you need to go get another tackle. And again, tackle supply is limited. It's expensive. I don't care if it's in free agency or the draft. Yes, over index, fix it. It's possible that like Darnell Wright is your only keeper on the offensive line right now. And that's a terrible place for any NFL. It's so expensive to try and replace 4 starters on an offensive line in 1 year. It's almost impossible.
It really is. And I think the general managers also have some trepidation outside of those organizations, like, let's say, maybe an Eagles or some of these teams that have truly put that heavy investment into that offensive line in a major way where they recognize it. The ones that don't do that seem to really turn hard away from that. You mentioned trades, and I think you're right. They're hard to be done. But I think that they're also, let's see if you buy into this, I think that these trades don't get done for these offensive linemen because of some of these general managers who have a little bit of that mindset of it's not the most important thing to me, because they know that they have to give up too much draft capital to get it done. Like, it would take you giving up that extra pick you don't want to give up to make it happen, to sway that other general manager to let that really good offensive lineman out of their grip. And then they don't want to cross that bridge. Do you think I'm off on that?
No, I don't. Not at all. And the reason I don't think that is because I'm a Bears fan, not because I don't personally believe it, but I've watched, again, one of the most confusing things about this is Ryan Poles is a former offensive lineman himself. Like, that's what he was as a player. So you would believe that he believes in its importance to a football team. He has not been able to get it done, and he's taken that approach of I will do these lower end trades, I will do these lower picks. I will not put, outside of Darnell Wright, a huge priority on it. And it hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked, and it hasn't worked. And he still believes in it. I still talk to some people like, yeah, you need a center, but I wouldn't spend like a low first round pick on them, even though it's one of the safest positions to pick in the draft historically, statistically. And I'm like, well, when does that become a thing? Like, what more do you need to see to say this is wrecking our chance at offensive success? And it's a little bit of offensive line blindness in general. I think a lot of people don't. They say, yeah, you have to have a good offensive line. You're like, okay, pay for it. And they're like, well, that might be a little too much. And you're like, well, if you want one, you have to do the other. And again, we're talking about supplies being limited. There is not an overabundance of great offensive line talent around the NFL, right? There is a dearth of it. Like, there is less than you need. You see teams every week, especially this week, like these last weeks of the season, when attrition has happened, you see teams rolling out some pretty sketchy guys on offensive line at a pro level. There's just not enough of them rolling around. It is a difficult position. and you're going to have to pay for it if you want it. And everybody says it's important, but then push comes to shove, and I don't know. Maybe I'll give a third round pick for a center, but I wouldn't do a second. Like, I've had people who are hardcore Chicago fans who understand the draft, who are in the business, tell me, I wouldn't pay a high second for a center. And I'm really? Okay. Like, Creed Humphrey was a high second. You wouldn't pay a high 2 for somebody like Creed to anchor the Bears line for the next 10 years? Why not?
Oh, it's one of the worst moments for me in my streaming history to be on live. Just me and our whole fan base in unison. Creed is the picks coming up. I swear to God, it's on. I'm filming. I'm like, this is so no brainer. This is so easy, John. This is just where value meets need. It's the perfect genesis of drafting. And Dwayne Eskridge. So that hurts even more. That one stung. Yeah, that one stung. Really? The guy that's got no catch radius and can't catch as a receiver? That's kind of a problem. But how is I think you mentioned the thing about Caleb Williams and that the offensive line preventing the development is such a huge part of this. I've railed on this. I don't get why they've tried there with polls. But once you get Caleb an offensive line, where is your success or where is your confidence level about his ability to then tap into that great talent? I mean, in that, I guess, have you seen it enough a little bit in that way, even in the moments there go, it's there, just get this.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with Caleb. He has regressed over the last couple of weeks, and it's been tough to see as a Bears fan. That is particularly hurtful to my heart, but it's there. Like, he looks like he is not playing like himself. And again, we've seen this with lots of quarterbacks. You could say Geno, you could say Sam Darnold, you could say Bryce Young. You could say Baker early in his career. There are as many examples of quarterbacks not meshing with situations, and Caleb was clearly not meshing with Waldron. We've seen it though, that he has been able to do it under Waldron a little bit, under Thomas Brown, since Thomas Brown's been elevated to head coach. Like, there are those moments, there are drives, there are throws. It's all there. And statistically, it's not that bad. It's overblown because he's a number 1 overall pick. It's always going to be a huge microscope. But if you look at him historically for like rookie seasons, he's fine. He's not the problem. People say he holds the ball too long. Yes, in certain situations, he absolutely does. He's also been hit at a historic rate. So he never knows when he's going to get hit and when he doesn't. People are like, even when he gets protection. He didn't know he was getting protection because he didn't the last time. And statistically, he's not going to get it the next time. So he's not aware when he takes the snap. This is the one I'm getting protection on. Like, that's what everybody looks at on film. They go, he had a good pocket on this one. Why didn't he do the great thing? Because he got hit on the play before and the play after. Like, that's just a human piece of playing quarterback. But in terms of his ability on the field, once somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm going to get you back to playing in a comfortable way because you're a talented guy. Yeah, I'm good. Would I like it to look better? Sure, I would like it to look better. Am I worried that it's, not that he's not the guy? I'm not.
They don't, fans don't like to hear about the cumulative pounding a quarterback will take and what that does to them mental wise over the scope of not just a game by game, play by season, and that they don't like to hear that answer. But when you get the statistics that back this up with pressure and quarterback hit rates, we've been told, haven't we, EJ, time and time again, that this happens to any quarterback. I don't care if it's one of these superhero star types that people want to glom onto. They all, to a degree, implode. They all see their performance suffer.
Yeah, no, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, 2 of the greatest quarterbacks ever. If you talk to people, it's like, how do you get those guys off their game? Hit them.
Yeah.
Like those 2 guys in particular, hit them. They're not the most mobile. Put them down. Like, bang them around because they're not used to it, and they'll get edgy, they'll get angsty, they'll get angry. And sometimes that worked against you, but oftentimes, as you said, their performance degraded when they took a pounding. Wasn't necessarily pressures, but when they got physical hits stacking up on them, which they didn't a lot of the time. Both of their general managers at the point, you talked about Dante Scarnecchia being a great line coach for the Patriots. Like, now, they didn't necessarily always invest highly, but those lines played together and Tom didn't get hit, because if Tom got hit, people heard about it and you didn't play. So, but the teams that were successful against even the greatest quarterbacks in history, they hit them, right? Because nobody likes being hit. Like, if I walked into your podcast studio and punched you in the mouth, you'd get angsty, right? You'd probably not be as focused. Like, it's very human nature stuff.
Yeah. And it's also in Waldron's offense, there's a bit of a predilection towards leaning on holding the ball for some of the longer developing routes he'd have in there. It's not as much that we've gotten with Grubb at times this year where the ball will get out of Geno's. You see a difference between Waldron and Grubb on that respect, where Geno's actually at times getting that ball out of his hands quick on really quick design stuff, where Waldron seemed like there's more of that, give it a minute, hold it. It's a little Braveheart, hold it, hold it.
No, watching Geno has been a bit of a mirrored experience with, I would say, better results. If you look at statistically what he's been able to accomplish, better results than Caleb, but he's been doing it, like you said, with very little offensive line protection, but he's a 12-year vet. He's not a rookie, and he's been doing yeoman's work. For all the Seahawks fans out there that are like, Geno sucks. Like, no, he really doesn't. He's doing tremendous work with what he has. Yes, his thing is not holding the ball too long. It's cutting down on interceptions, especially in the red zone. Those have been the killers for him, and that's his particular, weight to bear. But he's been doing tremendous work. But the situation a lot of times in terms of dropping back and having pressure in your face directly from the inside has been very, very similar. Like it's me and the Leonardo DiCaprio gif with a beer in my hand pointing at the TV going, I've seen this one. I've seen this one.
Or the Spider-Man meme.
Those two pointing at each other like neither one of us have an offensive line, dude. Like, how are you doing? How are you?
This is brutal, isn't it? Yeah, this is brutal.
Yeah,
my quarterback's starting to see some ghosts. Mine is too. It's like Casper in that backfield every time.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you mentioned the guy. It sounds like you're kind of hot to trot on, if I might say so myself, a little bit. I don't know if it's interdivisional stuff there, but you mentioned Ben Johnson is maybe the guy, is the replacement. Is that the guy? And why is it not Cliff Kingsbury?
Oh, geez. Cliff, I think, is a tremendous offensive play caller. I'm not so sure he's a tremendous head coach. And there's a big difference. And there's a lot of questions around that with Ben Johnson as well, because he hasn't done that, right? He hasn't been the head guy. And we talked about it with Thomas Brown. Anybody being elevated from one role to another, it's a big step up in the NFL. And there are a lot more things on your plate as a head coach. And that's where the uncertainty comes from. I think more than me being hot on Ben Johnson, it's the world is hot on Ben Johnson. Like, please give Chicago offense. Who's the best offense going right now in terms of adaptability, in terms of being able to take, again, possibly a lesser talented quarterback. I think Jared Goff is extremely talented, but he saw his limitations with McVay, and McVay said, I have to move on and get something else. And what Ben Johnson's been able to do over a series of years now, because a lot of people thought he was going to leave last year. He ended up staying on again, and he stayed ahead. And it's very, very hard to stay ahead in the NFL. Defensive coordinators, they all have the tape. They all go to school. And after 6 or 8 weeks, they're like, okay, we know what you're doing. We're going to shut it down. And Ben Johnson has managed to stay a step ahead. The offense that he's created for the Lions is very, very impressive. They have a lot of talent, but we've seen some very talented offenses that don't turn out results. His offenses turn out results. So I think that's just the sort of natural pairing in the air of like, please give Caleb a coach who understands offense. Please give the Bears an offense. That would be fun. And so Ben Johnson is naturally the first name on the list because he's had more continued success on offense than just about anybody in the league. There are other names being floated out there. We'll see.
Just don't make it a defensive coach, though, right?
And it has to be the right guy. And if the defensive coach has a very good offensive coordinator that he's going to bring along, I'm cool with that. And it's tough to find those guys because you kind of have to go 2 levels below. You have to find a quarterback's coach who's ready to be an offensive coordinator. You're not going to find another offensive coordinator typically who's going to jump ship. So it's got to be a receivers coach or, like we said, an offensive line coach, or sometimes a running back coach. Not very often, but oftentimes a passing game coordinator sometimes will take the elevation, or somebody that's like a quarterback's coach. So you have to start looking around that level of the league and say, okay, who's on the cusp? Who's ready to make the jump? Because again, if you hire a Ben Johnson, like he's going to be calling the plays and he's going to have an offensive coordinator name who might be like a run game coordinator, but probably not even. It's just going to be somebody to bounce ideas off of. And that's fine. That works for folks like Matt LaFleur. Folks like Kevin O'Connell, for the most part, they're going to call plays and it's going to work. And that's why they were brought into the building. So Ben would be that. If it's a defensive guy, you've got to have a guy who is ready and understands that, because it's going to be the biggest question. And there's no room for failure. It can't be slow. It can't be bad, because everybody will say, should have had Ben. right? There's just, when he's out in the space, his gravity is, he's the offensive mastermind. You didn't get him. That naturally bleeds into, you didn't want to pay for him, you're cheap, whatever it is. If for any reason you don't get him, and whoever you bring in, another offensive guy or a defensive guy who brings in their own, maybe even experienced offensive coordinator, if that offense sputters, they have to play against the ghost of Ben Johnson being in Chicago. So,
yeah. What about a Stefanski potentially as a guy if he got let go from Cleveland?
If Kevin Stefanski got fired, he would be hired in like 2 minutes.
I agree.
By multiple people. The Bears they'd have to get into a bidding war. Stefanski is a very smart coach who got hamstrung by his owner deciding this is who I want at quarterback, and hell or high water, I'm going to do all the bad things to make that happen. And it's very hard to create an offense in the NFL in spite of your quarterback. And Browns fans can say whatever they want. Like, Deshaun was historically bad this year. Like, very, very bad. Not just bad for the league, not bad for the top 30 this year. He had some metrics that were like, oh, there's 230 quarterbacks ranked, and he's 228th all time, this season. Like, he was really, really bad. So it's not on Stefanski. He's a good coach. He's proved he can handle the head coach mantle, to be the, leader of men. I hate that term, but like, he knows how to do that. He knows how to put an offense together. If you give him a capable, when Jameis came on and before he was hurt, like, Brown's offense picked right up, made Jerry Jeudy look like Jerry Rice for about 3 weeks. And you're like, okay, like I would take that. So, but I don't think there's any chance. He just got an extension like last year.
Did it? They're
not firing.
I just wondered about their situation with him because they may be looking at finally getting to that pivot point where, like, okay, we got to take our medicine.
And I think everybody understands that it was the owner choosing Deshaun. It was not Kevin.
Right, exactly.
Or the general manager. Yeah. So he could try and cut bait himself, which would be not unprecedented, but the Browns would also get compensation for that, which would mean you'd have to trade for him. The other one I've heard is Shanahan, which you're very familiar with in the division. I'm like, look at what the Niners have done over the last 5 years. They're not cutting Kyle Shanahan loose again, unless he puts his foot down, which there's no indication of, and says, I've had it with you. I doubt that very much for either one of those guys. It's a pipe dream as a Bears fan to have a coach as competent as Kyle Shanahan or Kevin Stefanski. Yes, please, all day, twice on Sunday.
I do a lot of stuff with Niner content creators, and I tell you, it blows me away talking to them every time. Where I'm like, you guys just went to the Super Bowl last year. He just doesn't have it, man. They've got this ethereal feeling about him that he doesn't got the stuff. He gets you the top, but he's gonna choke.
You know what's funny? You know who they said that about for years and years before he left his post for his current post, which is now a long time ago, so a lot of people don't remember.
Reed.
Yep. That was the exact book on Andy Reid and Philly. He wins a lot of games, and teams look really good, gets to the camp, win the big one. He's never going to win the big one, right? Yeah, pretty good coach right there. Like, people, I understand that, welcomes wear out, but not always for the right reasons. And, I think Andy Reid's proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, damn good NFL coach. And Shanahan the same way. And yes, a lot of those complaints are the same. And maybe it will take a change of scenery. I don't know. I don't think that's this year.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think there's really no chance with Shanahan. I just would say, just a theoretical to you, Johnson's kind of the silent sort of number one to a degree to you, but if you had a chance to flip a second round pick for a Stefanski, let's just say, and it does come out because they say, hey, we're going to move Myles Garrett this offseason. Watson's not it. We got to eat this contract. Let's do you kind of a solid. And you've been a good soldier. It's not your fault. Which would you take of those two scenarios?
Ooh, it's a great question. I think if Ben wants to coach the Bears, and I think he does, he's certainly seeding through the media and his agent. Also that stumble bum, big fumble in the Bears stadium was very much a flare to Kevin Warren. Like, I'm right here, man. All you got to do is pay me. Like, I could be doing this for you, not to you. Your choice.
He styles on him.
Oh, for sure. That was stunting on the Bears for good reason. And I think everybody kind of wants it for Ben. They want to win the Super Bowl this year for sure. They didn't think he was coming back this year anyways. He had a full round of head coaching interviews last year. Everybody, including me, thought he was on the way to doing that. He comes back, but I think everybody's kind of like, yeah, let's let's get Ben paid. Like he's not going to be here long term. This is not a Bieniemy situation. Like he's going to go be a head coach. Let's get him paid. If he wants to go be in the division and get money and he thinks he can do that from the Bears, let's go for it. Like it would be really cool. Again, there are two things. Stefanski, absolutely rock solid as a head coach. I think a very good offensive mind. The run game would be a lot of fun. I'd love that. But also the passing game's there too. Ben, just continued innovation. Like he keeps having the answers ahead of the test. And that is so hard to do. So can he, as a young offensive guy that hasn't had the mantle, like a Matt LaFleur or like a Kevin O'Connell, come in and be a really good head guy and continue to have those offenses, on the top shelf in the NFL? That's the hope. So I wouldn't be sad with either. And it really comes down to the folks in the room and agreeing with a general manager, and saying, hey, we can do this together, because all of those guys, even Kevin, but certainly Shanahan for the Niners, LaFleur in Green Bay, Brad Holmes with Campbell in Detroit, like Stefanski and Kwesi in Minnesota. There's a link between those two. They understand each other. The GM is providing talent that the coach knows how to use and wants. And they've got that mind meld going, and all of those teams are successful because of it. The Bears have not gotten that. So if that means moving on from Ryan Poles, refilling the GM chair, very tough thing to do. But you got to make sure that link is strong, because the two links you need are GM to head coach and head coach to quarterback. Like, and you need those things.
It does feel though like your Bears are at least going to get an exciting hire this time. Like
I hope so.
Nagy.
If they go for a less exciting hire, I think open revolt, pitchforks, torches, the whole bit.
Because you got Caleb there as an attractive component. The receiving core is there. David Moore's gotten a little weird this year, maybe rightfully so with the route concept stuff. But, there's been some moments with him on tape where it's like, whoa, you're walking off the field mid-play. Mid-play.
Spacing's been really odd. Effort's been up and down, both on offense and defense. So I think most Bears fans are kind of ready to sim to the end of this season because it hasn't looked great.
Well, do you think that your Bears team is close, or that they're far away here with this offseason approach, whoever they bring in as a coach?
I think it can turn around very quickly. We talked about Dave Canales a little bit earlier in Carolina. We talked about D'Amico coming into Houston. Both of those were toxic situations. They, as teams, they were down on their luck. Everybody, their fortunes were in the dirt. Both of them turned around basically within a year because they got the right guy. They had a quarterback in place, like I said. Canales has resurrected Bryce, and he's looking very, very good. CJ Stroud didn't need any resurrection. He came in walking on water, and D'Amico and Bobby Slowick kept him there. So it's very possible that teams that you can look at and say, God, they're such a mess, turn around very quickly if you get the right people in leadership positions. So that's my hope. If I'm pinning my hope on something, that's it. They get the right person to lead the team, and that turnaround happens very quickly. People buy in, the right players are there. You get what you need. The Bears fan in me with a little PTSD goes, God, they're going to ruin another one, because that's what we've seen. So I tend to be more hopeful and optimistic, but there's not a great track record for that. I'm hoping for a change. Like you said, they're going to hire, you said the exciting guy. I'm going to say the right guy.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's both in this one given time. You get to have both those things come along, because you guys are due. It's been a lot of suffering for a good amount of years there. A couple of super chats donations here. Chad, thank you for 4 months as a Hawks Nest member. Says happy holidays, Lions, Bills, Super Bowl. That's my prediction. What do you think, EJ? You feeling that?
Game. It'd be a great game. I would love that, because I would love to see Josh Allen get over the hump, and he's playing so well right now. He deserves it. It's not just Josh should have it, because no. That Bills team, and Joe Brady is another name you're going to see in the coaching cycle, has done a tremendous job since taking over. We talked about Ben Johnson and the Lions a lot. I would love to see it, Chad. That would be a tremendous game. I would make sure to, have my popcorn ready, have my feet up for that one. That would be amazing.
How can you not root for the Bills with him taking his game to where he's taken it now and continue to getting better to where they've locked in for years to earn this right to a franchise that has spent years, including those you and I were old enough to remember that 4-year run, which was just brutal for them. Your heart went out to them at that time when that 4 Super Bowl losses in the 90s. So I think it's Bills would be the one to go with. And I don't know if the Lions are going to have enough healthy bodies to get through to the end here with them. I mean, the guys they got going on IR at this point, they might run out of little bit out of gas there. Spencer Smith, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, I absolutely love EJ and Brett and everything they do. However, I'm going to need to get back on his AJ Barner take. Seems like a real weapon in the pass game.
Yeah, I did not like Barner as a receiver. He was athletic. He didn't, and it's a classic case of the draft to where he didn't get asked to do it a lot. Doesn't mean he can't do it. And, we've seen that with guys like George Kittle, like tremendous athlete, was a great blocker, didn't get asked to catch a lot of passes at Iowa, comes out Hall of Fame tight end. Like, I'm not saying AJ Barner is a Hall of Fame tight end. I'm saying he has shown more in the passing game than I thought. He was really brought in as a blocking weapon. And strangely, he's been really good catching the ball, but he's gotten his backside whooped a couple of times in run blocking lately. And I'm like, wait, what bizarre world is this where AJ Barner can't block, but he can catch? So it's been a fascinating arc for him. Obviously, huge catch for him this weekend. It's nice to see him developing. And again, we know he can block. He didn't forget how to do that, but he's gotten taken advantage of by some very talented players over the last month or so.
Yeah, it's been consistent throughout the year with him on the run blocking front of things where he's struggled. He's getting pushed back. He's getting physically overwhelmed, which you didn't think watching the Michigan tape where he was their inline guy and Loveland was their H back. That's the guy that's getting all the catches essentially with it. And does good reminder here from Spencer. Thank you for the $5. This is, of course, EJ Snyder from Bootleg Football, and he's been kind enough on his Christmas Eve to come in here for almost an hour to chill with us. We always do this on this channel when we get a guest like that. You're going to click down in the description link section below. There's a link directly to Bootleg Football here on YouTube. We sub up on here. That's what we do. So let's show some love on that and make sure that we're subbing up over their channel for him taking time. He's been here multiple times before. So let's please do show him the love on that side of it. As they do also some great grade A content throughout the year. So please do that on that end. But thank you, Spencer. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation and two $2 donations from him. He says, EJ, thoughts on AR? Now, has anything changed?
A little bit. He showed a little sort of burst after his benching, and we were hoping that he would follow the Bryce Young continuum and continue to improve. He kind of plateaued, and I don't want to say regressed, but because he was at his starting level was extremely low before the benching, and we've just seen that he can't hit the singles right now. And as a quarterback in the NFL, no matter how talented you are, you need to hit the singles. As a runner, he is, I would say, either the most dangerous physical runner at the quarterback position, right up there with Josh Allen, as a guy who can just get yards whenever you need it, which is tremendous. I think Lamar is a different type of runner, equally dangerous, but a different type of runner. So he brings a really cool element to the game, and he has all the tools physically in the passing game. You just throw it as far as you want. He can be accurate, but man, guy just can't hit a layup like 50% of the time. And that's not going to get you very far in the NFL. So I want to see Steichen stick with it and find a way to bring all those gifts to bear. The clock's starting to tick a little bit louder at this point. It's like, okay, he's got a bunch of starts. I realize he was extremely inexperienced as a college starter, but he showed some really high level traits despite that inexperience. So it's super frustrating because it's tantalizing, right? This huge guy, massive arm, can run like a deer. It just can't hit like side screens half the time. And just it's rough. It's tough to watch. So I predicted superstar status for him this year because I know who his quarterback coach is and had some long conversations with those folks in the offseason, and they raved about his work ethic and how far he'd come and everything else. And I was like completely bought in, and has not happened.
Well, maybe it'll just turn out to be one of those your early type situations on him.
I hope so.
That is one of those places.
God, I hope so. And so do Colts fans.
Yeah, that's our part of the evaluation process. This guy's got 13 starts at the college level, but you're being asked to make an evaluation on him on where his upside is and where he's going. And you've got to make that call, and you're seeing it. The flashes are there. I know he works hard, and this equivalent, is equivalent out to he's going to be able to have that top end. So I think in doing that math, that's not wrong. Is that's the player that he was showing you could be, and you're asked to do that math. You've got to make the call one way or the other, and it's much easier to go, well, it'll just be a bust and just lean on that. First, you did see the flourish. I saw the same flourishes.
Yeah.
It's tough. Femi says thoughts on Grubb now, EJ and Josh, or Lamar for MVP.
Ooh, the second one I'll take second because that's the harder of the two. Thoughts on Grubb. Grubb needed to understand that at the pro level, you need to run the football in different ways. He ran the football at UW a bunch. Like, people think that he was just all passing with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers he had. It wasn't the case. He was one of two. He would run the ball until you tried to stop running the ball, and then he would play action you to death with all those guys. And there was no in between. There was very little, and it was either run game or run game adjacent, which is tunnel screens and using wide receivers as an extension of the run game. But he's able to do that differently at the college level, and he thought that that was going to translate to the pro level, and it didn't, because guys are bigger and faster. Defensive schemes are more adaptive. They react more quickly typically than they do in college. You don't get to put it on somebody for an entire game who just doesn't know how to adapt. By the second quarter, the defensive coordinator on the other side is like, nope, you don't get to do that or that. And then kind of felt like he didn't have the counterpunch after that. That's the thing I was talking about with offensive coordinators earlier, is that ability to stay ahead. And it was really hamstringing him because the protection wasn't great. We've talked about that. Geno was getting beat up. He's having to throw it very quickly, and run game wasn't great. And all of a sudden you're like, well, what do you have left? There are a lot of questions, and the questions, I'll just share this with your listeners. The questions got louder quicker than I thought. I heard from somebody 3 weeks ago that was like, 4 weeks ago at this point, who said, I don't think Grubb's coming back. And I was like, what? One and done? Like, no, like that didn't even seem possible to me. So I checked around a little bit, and some people were like, that's quieted down over the last month significantly because the run game. I talked about this in the open just a bit 2 weeks ago. Like, they kind of hit it. It was Zach Charbonnet. I think K-Walk is a much more talented back. He struggled with health a little bit, but like, I really like Charbonnet. And the Seahawks and Grubb specifically pivoted and said, okay, I still want to run game. I need to figure out how to do this. I need to try some other things. The things I tried initially weren't working, or they were being countered too quickly. They were getting us off stride, because that's all a defense wants to do, is take your first punch and stop it and say, okay, punch with the other hand, go for it. And they kind of couldn't in the run game. They figured that out a couple of weeks ago, and we started to see more balance come back to the offense. We started to see a little bit more usage of the tight ends, things like that. I think Grubb's fine at this point, but
you think he's staying?
I think he probably is, unless he chooses to go. Now, that could be a thing. I don't know Grubb. I've never met him. I know people that have. They say he's just all about ball, and he might decide that he wants ball at a different level, but I don't think so. I think if he wants to stay, he can stay at this point. But I was very surprised at all to hear any rustlings of that. It's very rare mid first year for an offensive coordinator to have those kind of questions after the team has had some success. Yes, there have been some stumbles for sure, but it was really nice to see Grubb adapt specifically over the last month. And as long as he continues to do that, every coach, every coordinator is going to have those moments. We see it with young head coaches. Nick Sirianni had that when he took over in Philly. Like, every coach is going to run up against it and go, crap, what I thought was going to work, why I thought I was so smart, everything I pitched to get this job, like half of it worked, and now I need to figure out the other half. And Grubb feels like he's figuring out the other half. Second question, Josh Lamar for MVP. Absolutely coin toss. Like, it kind of feels like the Heisman. You could have picked Hunter or Genty for the Heisman. I wouldn't have been upset. They both had historic, amazing seasons. It's which historic, amazing season do you want? If the Bills make a long run in the playoffs, it's probably Josh. But Lamar is playing tremendous football under Todd Monken. And if he got it, I wouldn't be at all sad. Like, neither one of those guys as a choice is going to make me sad. They've both played some of the best football in the NFL. And that's, for me, that's really what MVP is supposed to be about. And you could say the same thing about Saquon, but Saquon's a running back. And even though the NFL won't say so, this is an award for quarterbacks.
Yeah. I don't know how you deny this year, Josh. Just the type of season he had, that game that he had against the Rams a couple weeks ago, where just put the whole team up on his back. You got to do it to me on that side of it. Sanchez question for you says, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, what do I not understand about the Chicago ownership?
Oh my God, that's a whole nother podcast. I will try and skip across the top of the waves here because it's a lot. Okay, so it's a family-owned team. It is not a person-owned team. New ownership and old ownership in the NFL are very, very different, and there is a distinct line. It's multimillionaires versus multi-billionaires, and that is a huge distinction. It is ownership groups headed by a single entity, as we saw take over in Washington, the other Washington, last year, versus family ownership. In the case of the Bears, there are, I believe it's 11 family stakeholders and 2 non-family stakeholders who are descendants of George Halas business partners. So there's 13 people, 13 cooks. And Virginia McCaskey, Halas's daughter, owns the largest share, but it is not a majority share. The majority of the rest of those 13 have minority shares that are equal. Makes it very, very difficult. Many of them are not particularly interested in football or the football product. They would like their money, but as Virginia McCaskey said famously long ago, we can either be rich or we can be the owners of the Bears, but we cannot be the rich owners of the Bears. And that is exceptionally true. The money is in the franchise, right? And it is not the same as a Stan Kroenke, who, if you are a general manager and you go and you say, hey, we need to pay Matt Stafford all the money. And he says, great, will it help us win? And they go, yeah, absolutely. And he goes, cool, here's a check. It's a Tuesday. I don't care, whatever. Right? That's new NFL ownership. It is not that way in Chicago. There is not a clear path to decision-making. There is not a clear future when Virginia McCaskey passes on. She is over 100 years old. So there's a lot of layers. They added Kevin Warren as a president over the GM to oversee all football things and really be the football person, because previously it was family folks that weren't really great at that. We'll see whether that approach pays dividends, but there's just a lot. There's layers upon layers there, and it's not great. And they haven't had success in a very long time. So there's a question about whether or not they know how to do that. If you saw a business in your local area who was doing the same thing year after year after year and just failing and failing and failing and failing, at some point you would go, look, it's a family-owned business and I really appreciate it. But their pizza's just not very good. That's why nobody goes there. NFL's a little bit different, but it kind of has that vibe to it of like, hey, you don't know how to do this. You either need to hire somebody like Kevin Warren, who you think does, and empower him, which they kind of have. So we'll see if that makes a change, or, sell the pizzeria to somebody that like really wants to make pizza, because you ain't it.
I feel like there'd be a local billionaire somewhere there in Chicago somewhere. Like,
everybody says Bezos. Bezos is the kind of next guy up in terms of ownership. And I get questions fairly often from my NFL friends. Would that be a good thing? And I'm like, from a resource perspective, it would be a tremendous thing. From other perspectives, I'm not particularly sure it would be awesome. But again, you don't have a lot of choices. It is a very rare group of individuals who can think about buying an NFL team.
I think that I get the Bezos hesitancy, but at least you got a guy at the purse strings who's going to do everything he can from a resource standpoint, which has been the main thing holding back your franchise, as we talk about, it seems like, and what you're talking about, and just in the outside looking into that Bears franchise of, hey, he's going to remedy what's been our biggest issue potentially from preventing us from getting this back to the mountaintop spot. You already answered on this one, EJ. Thank you for that. Janice for the $5. So he just answered on this one with the thoughts on the Ryan Grubbs performance year one. So Merry Christmas to you on that, Janet. He likes the adjustments he's made, and he feels pretty. And he gave us a little nugget there, did EJ, on having a little bit of some connections in here in the league, and hearing some rumors a couple weeks ago about maybe Grubb being on maybe the out ski, but maybe he's been able to save a little bit of his job here down the home stretch to get on into next year. Phoebe Morseox asks, with $2 donation, do you believe Matt Stafford will retire after the season?
Oh, these are great. I appreciate all these questions. This is awesome, Brendan. I have been on record, again, as an NFC North fan, as a Bears fan, I watched Matt Stafford forever, and he takes, not just took, he takes more punishment than most quarterbacks. There is not a tougher dude in the league at any position than Matt Stafford. He is sustained so many injuries, and he just keeps getting up and throwing it, and his arm hasn't fallen off. And for the last 3 years, I've been saying, man, Matt Stafford, it's got to add up at some point. Like, all those injuries, like, he getting up in the morning, like his arm's going to fall. Like, he's proved everything he needs to prove. He's going to walk away. He is still out there. You see him with fire in the 2-minute drive, like taking hits and getting on guys and chewing them and be like, come on. Like, I can't believe you're not on it. Like, let's go. He still loves football. And that fire is holding him, and his arm has not dropped off, as we've seen with a lot of late career quarterbacks. So as long as he can still throw it like he can throw it, and man, can he throw it. I'm just going to be done. I'm just going to put that on the shelf and he can decide when he's going to quit. And I'm going to stop talking about it because I've been wrong for like 4 years. So
it's like they say, the arm's the last thing that goes. I will say I get the thing from that, movie, dun, 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 when he goes in, tries to get off the handoff to outside zone and he's trying to get those legs up and
yeah.
And you see his face
slightly better than Kirk Cousins, but only slightly.
Yeah. Oh man, they're stretching like hard. But thank you, Feed Me, for all your donations. Rowan says, with a $5 donation, says, dude, what the F? I wake up to see my two favorite NFL YouTube people on stream together without warning. You know,
we Rowan? Don't tell you. I mean, if we told you what your Christmas present was beforehand, would you like it as much? And the answer is no. I looked once as a kid, never did that again.
Exactly.
But, no, a little bit of a surprise, Rowan. I'm glad. Happy that
we were under orders from Santa, Rowan. That's what's going on here.
We don't mess with the elves here.
That's right. We don't. Last couple questions here. We'll wrap up with Feed Me says, I need to know what your sources are saying on Brock Purdy. Is he getting a deal?
Purdy's great. If they move on from him, I would be very surprised. Like Kyle Shanahan went through so many quarterbacks looking for Brock Purdy. He found Brock Purdy. He is really happy with Brock Purdy. Like, look at the list of guys he went through going, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm not there. I mean, Jimmy G, and then they drafted Trey Lance high, and that didn't like all the guys, Mullins, all the guys that he went through in San Francisco. And he got to Brock Purdy, and they are set. There is no question. Brock Purdy's a starter if he's healthy. Like, Shanahan finally got what he wanted. It's so rare. You're not moving on from that unless there, again, is a major rift behind the scenes, which I certainly haven't heard anything about that. Like, Purdy's a great quarterback. They've had a lot of issues. Purdy's a great quarterback. He's a little bit like Geno in the fact that he does a lot that people don't necessarily give him credit for. Different situations, different things that they do, but as a high-level quarterback, Brock Purdy is exactly what Shanahan wants, for better or worse. Doesn't really matter, because that's the prerogative, and you need to have that relationship. Once he hit Brock Purdy, he's not looking anymore. He's not spending draft picks. There's not talk about trades. Like, he's like, nope, Brock's my guy. That guy's not going anywhere.
So he'll be a $50 million man this offseason. That's what you're saying.
The contracts are really interesting. We could have a whole nother episode about contracts because there's like the Baker contract, which I think is the new like secondary standard. It's not just everybody. Now all the quarterbacks will push for the top. But
just hard to see how I can say, I get a dime less than Tua for me, from my perspective of what he's doing
for sure.
3 years there. And that's the tough part.
And his agent's really going to say that.
Yeah, I mean, and so how do you not have a great leg to stand on to a degree with it? Because you have outperformed that, and it's not fair that Tua got paid that amount. He shouldn't have got paid that amount. That's the real base problem here. But maybe we'll see if that middle tier contract can come up here. Janice says, my first time hearing EJ, but he's easily the most knowledgeable on football I've heard so far. Cheers. Well, that's very kind of you to say, Janet. Thank you.
It's a heck of a gift on Christmas. I will take that. I appreciate it. Wrapped or unwrapped. That's amazing.
There is no doubt EJ knows his stuff. He does a fine work over there at Bootleg Football, and throughout the year, whether it's NFL season, getting into free agency, going into the draft, they're doing as deep a dive as anybody out there. And so you want to be watching these guys, tracking these guys on what they do out there. But then, thank you, Janet. Appreciate you that. Sanchez, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, is the ceiling for Caleb a Grossman-like stat sheet?
Oh, God, no, it is not. The ceiling is so much higher. I lived through the Rex Grossman era. I was a Bears fan at that point. I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, but I clearly remember Rex Grossman being drafted and being like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And it was always interesting with Rex. I still, this is going to be a super NFL throwback. This is your Christmas gift for the older NFL fans in the audience who remember. So the Rex Grossman, I'm going to unleash the dragon t-shirt. Yeah. I've basically F it, blanks down there somewhere. I'm just going to whip it. That was Rex, and sexy Rexy. He would throw deep regardless. It was kind of the Jameis experience before Jameis. So no, Caleb's ceiling is much higher than Rex.
EJ, he was just leaning into the Favre comparisons. That's all he was doing. He's just leaning into the Favre comparisons.
Yeah. And how'd that turn out for him?
Taker 610 with a fiver. It says, when you see an above 500 team like the Seahawks that are 3-6 at home and 5-1 on the road, what is your first thought on what might be happening?
We do an off-season preview series on Bootleg, and one of the things I have in there about the team record is the overall record, of course, but then homer on the road records. And it's always fascinating to me to see a huge skew in either direction. Road warriors that win way more on the road than they do at home are interesting. And there can be reasons for that. Obviously, strength of schedule and how those teams are. Some teams just travel very well. And then vice versa, teams that are thought to be very good, very solid, very complete football teams that go on the road and just can't win. If we're talking about the Bears, this is one of my least favorite statistics. Matt Eberflus never won. He only won 3 road games in his tenure as a Bear. He never won a road game on a Sunday. Oh, no. And you're like, that would be great if it's not when you play like 90% of them. But it's fascinating. Year to year, strength of schedule varies a lot. But whenever there's a big variance for a team and they win way more at home and less on the road or vice versa, it's just something I pay attention to. And I kind of dig in and go, okay, what was the reason for that? And sometimes it's just a weird tick where they overperform when they travel. But more typically, it tends to be like the teams they played on the road were the weak teams on their schedule. Yeah. So it worked out that way.
I think you're on the button with this one, by the way, with the Buffalo Bills, with the Rams in at home, with Detroit, or not Detroit, but the last 2 weeks here with the Vikings and the Packers that we had to play at home. It kind of, to your strength of schedule argument and why this plays out that way, that would seem to be the truth of this. So that's probably it there, Taker. It doesn't help that we're having home fans now take over Lumen Field for the first time in my lifetime, be it in the Kingdom or Husky Stadium. That's been a little bit disappointing to watch, EJ.
Yeah, no, it's not a Seattle tradition to have a large alternate fan contingent in the stadium. Always a small one that gets a fair amount of abuse. And I don't mean don't travel to Lumen Field. It's a great place to watch a game, but you're going to hear about it if you show up in an opposing jersey for sure. Yeah, I mean, things change. It's not everybody's favorite change. And again, there's one thing that solves everything in the NFL: winning. You get a winning football team. Back. Yep, everybody will be there.
Well, I want to thank EJ and just put a note here today that as we do with the folks that come in as guests on this channel, we go over, send them some love. You should already be subbed up to them, quite frankly. So you guys shouldn't be. I'm already there. I'm like, love, notifications on. It's all there. But if you aren't, click the link down in the description section below directly to Bootleg Football here on YouTube. Sub up to the channel for him coming in and taking an hour of his day out of time here on Christmas Eve, as he has with us here on EJ. And man, EJ, I thank you for taking this amount of time to sit down with us and take a look at this game. But look at this really organizational. It's the big questions at this point, as much as anything, I think, for both of these teams, our team especially, that we're trying to understand and wrap our head around.
Yeah, for sure. And the other one is Bear Era. It's new this year. I was not going to be doing a Bears pod this year, but we started up about 4 weeks after the season started, and we had high hopes. It was a rough year to launch a Bears pod, but that is Bear Era over on YouTube. You can check that one out as well if you happen to have any interest in the Bears. If you don't, I fully understand. Bootleg covers the entire league. That's probably more your jam. But yeah, we're doing our Bear-focused work over there.
Well, if you guys lock it in by next year, next 2 years, you guys be in the right time, right place once it does. Because once you do get that winning, I know that does push a lot of that traffic on those individual kind of fronts. Well, Merry Christmas to you, EJ. Thank you so very much for coming here. I hope I can bring you back into the fold again here, maybe some point this offseason for us to maybe turn over some things for what's going around here in the NFL. But thanks for coming on in here. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Sounds like I might see you out on the scouting trail a little bit, maybe at the combine. We'll certainly sit down and have a beer at that point. And yeah, it'd be a pleasure to be back on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I would really look forward to it. You've sold me on it. I'm going to do it, I think, this year, and I would love to be able to hang with you there and just take that whole experience in, man. It'd be a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing for me on that. So thanks for watching today, folks. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Happy New Year. And let's see if we get this win this next game and stay alive and see if the Rams can lose, and maybe we just sneak into the playoffs like we did 10 years ago. Hey, we beat the Saints. We beat the Super Bowl champion the prior year, EJ, and 7-9 record, home field. So anything can happen in the playoffs, man. Well, thank you, man. Appreciate you. We'll be back soon here. But until then, don't you guys forget, go Hawks.